Iran has threatened to retaliate against a planned US blockade of its ports, which is due to start in the coming hours. A statement from the Iranian military described Washington's actions as piracy and warned that Iran would continue to control the Strait of Hormuz. On Sunday, President Trump saying any Iranian who opened fire at vessels passing through the strait would be, in his words, blown to hell. To remind you, the strait is that critical shipping route through which roughly 20% of the world's oil and natural liquefied gas is transported, plus other key goods as well. Its geography has allowed Iran to use it as leverage throughout this war, selectively preventing vessels from passing through the narrow waterway and spiking oil prices in the process. Mr. Trump also saying that the US would track down any vessel in international waters that had paid a toll to Tehran to pass through this key route. This escalation, of course, follows that collapse of marathon peace talks in Pakistan at the weekend, as our World News correspondent Joe Inwood explains.
It has become one of Iran's most powerful weapons. One of the world's busiest waterways, the Strait of Hormuz, all but shut by a naval blockade. Only a tiny number of ships get in or out, doing ever-increasing damage to the global economy. Getting it reopened was one of the US's key demands in this weekend's negotiations with Iran. They did not manage to do that, and so seem to have taken a different approach. President Trump posted on social media that the US will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. He also claimed other countries will be involved with this blockade. The US military confirmed that it will begin a blockade, but only of Iran's ports, starting later today.
Very good things are happening with regard to the Strait, Hormuz. I think Iran is in very bad shape. I think they're very desperate.
It's not yet clear how it will be enforced, and which other countries, if any, will be involved. It is a high-risk strategy fraught with difficulties.
It seems to be probably at least part of a negotiating strategy to ratchet up tension on Iran and also to hit them economically in terms of less revenues for Iran. Obviously, that's key for him. And as well as potentially put pressure on Iran's partners, such as China.
In Tehran, after nearly 40 days of constant airstrikes, to have pictures of negotiations on the front pages will come as some relief, even if they were not the headlines these people wanted.
I was really hoping they would make an agreement and reach a conclusion. It's been almost 45 days now, and I can see the stress in people. This is not what our country deserves.
I would like a way for the people of Iran to be happy. Anything that makes the people of Iran happy. I don't like this feeling of uncertainty. If the people are happy with war resolving it, then let the war happen so we can get some resolution.
Many in this country say they are tired of war. It is not clear if the imposition of a naval blockade on Iran's ports will make a return to fighting more or less likely. Joe Inwood, BBC News.
Our Middle East Bureau Chief Joe Floto is in Jerusalem, and he said we're not yet learning how the US military will actually enforce this blockade in the Strait of Hormuz.
We're all waiting for 5 o'clock my time, 5:30 in Iran, to see exactly how the US military will enforce this blockade. On the one hand, we might think that this is a way of creating a safe passageway for international traffic, as you were pointing out. They're so vital to the world economy to pass through the Straits of Hormuz. The question will come with the US Navy trying to stop Iranian ships coming in and out of the Straits of Hormuz. What will happen at that point? The Iranians have said they're going to push back very robustly. And will that threaten this ceasefire? And we're barely a week in. We're actually not quite a week into this ceasefire. So both sides currently don't appear to want to escalate this to the point of a renewed war. And yet both sides appear very maximalist in what they're willing to demand and concede.
Joe Floto there. Let's take you to Pakistan and join our correspondent, Carrie Davies, who is in Islamabad and has been following the talks for us over the weekend. What are you hearing from sources in Pakistan, Carrie, about what their expectation is of next steps? And is there talk that maybe further negotiations could take place? Is that the hope?
Well, Lucy, we definitely know that Pakistan wants to continue to be this facilitator between the US and Iran, and they want to continue to be, at the very least, passing messages back and forth between the two sides. And of course, we know they've been operating that back channel for the course of several weeks in the run-up towards these talks that happened over the course of the weekend. Of course, the big question is how much is that back channel potentially being used at the moment? We also know that that there have been sort of rumours circulating. Would they potentially go back to the negotiating table? Even President Trump had been talking about the suggestion. He said that he thought that Iran was going to come back to the negotiating table. Of course, we've had no confirmation from either side about whether they would be willing to have those sorts of discussions. We just don't know whether that is something that they're willing to do. But as we heard from Joe Floto and from Joe Inwood's pieces, we know that there is probably a lack of appetite for continued military conflict on both sides. It seems the fact that both of them came to Islamabad was seen as a very real effort to try to find some form of common ground, but their positions are so far apart. The big concern is whether or not these steps of blockading the Strait of Hormuz, does that lead to further escalation, even if both sides would actually quite like to be able to find some form of off-ramp here?
Carrie, great to get that update from you. Thank you so much. We have some breaking news to bring you, actually, about what is happening out in the Gulf at the moment. Being reported on the Reuters news agency that 2 Iranian-linked tankers have actually exited the Gulf via the Strait of Hormuz. This is ahead of the blockade, the US blockade that is coming up. So there is some movement happening out there in the Gulf. 2 Iranian-linked tankers exiting the Gulf via the Strait of Hormuz. And remember that we heard from CENTCOM, the US Central Command here, that US forces are not going to impede the freedom of vessels transiting to and from non-Iranian ports, and that commercial mariners are going to receive some kind of formal notice before the blockade actually starts. But what we're seeing here being reported on Reuters is that 2 Iranian-linked tankers have actually exited the Gulf, and they've used the Strait of Hormuz to do that. So they're moving away ahead of the expected US blockade. So what's the role of China been in the negotiations? How does all of this impact China, which is the world's biggest importer of oil? Our correspondent Laura Bicker is in Beijing, and she told me what is being said there about Chinese negotiating teams and tactics behind the scenes in this bigger picture.
Well, China has not yet confirmed that it was part of the kind of peacekeeping mission to try to get Tehran to the table with Washington in Pakistan over the weekend. But it does seem from some reporting and some sources that China did have a part in this. And that is because China will be severely concerned about what is happening, not just in Iran, but across the wider Middle East. Now, let's talk about oil, because China is the biggest importer of crude oil in the world. It has a number of reserves, around 3 months' supply, we think. However, it does need a lot of oil from the Middle East. From Iran, it takes about 13% of oil. If Donald Trump goes ahead and blockades Iranian ports, China can cope. But what China does need is all of its energy supplies and all of its goods to come through the Strait of Hormuz. It wants a safe passage for all of its ships through the Strait of Hormuz. And in the last hour, Beijing's foreign ministry has called for just that.
Laura Bicker there. Just to update you on what we were hearing from President Macron about an hour ago about the French and UK response to everything that's going on. Keir Starmer, the UK's Prime Minister, just backing up the French President by saying that the two countries will host a summit, co-host a summit to advance work on plans to safeguard shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Keir Starmer has been writing on X saying the ongoing closure of the Strait of Hormuz is deeply damaging, and getting global shipping moving is vital to ease the cost of living pressures, and that the UK has convened more than 40 nations who share our aim to restore freedom of navigation. So he's just confirming there that what we will see now is the French and the UK bringing together these countries to hold a summit. Well, let's bring in Mina Al-Arabi, who is the editor of Abu Dhabi-based news service The National. Very good to have you with us, Mina. The sense here in Qatar, everyone really worried, but very watchful, just waiting to see what will happen next. What's the reaction to this US blockade where you are?
So here in Abu Dhabi, similarly as you described, Lucy, there's a sense of apprehension, waiting to see what happens. The talks in Islamabad, officials didn't expect that they would come to an immediate agreement, but there's no next steps of what the talks could lead to. And now, of course, we're hearing of a US blockade of the initial Iranian threat on the Strait of Hormuz. The UAE position has been incredibly clear. The Strait of Hormuz is not Iran's to block. Those are the words of Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, who's the Minister of Industry here, but also Group CEO of Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. And very clearly, they're speaking to other countries that are equally affected by this. You've spoken about China, but of course also India. Globally, Europe is affected. And there are countries around the world worrying that if suddenly the law of the seas is unraveling, then other straits around the world could be affected, which is why you're hearing very strong words also from countries like Singapore who are affected. So everyone's watching. At the same time, at 6 p.m. Abu Dhabi time, 5:30 Tehran time, when the US will try to impose this blockade, there's also a sense of no real multilateral work together. We're hearing the Europeans working on one side. The UN last week had said that they would try to get involved to open the straits. But ultimately, it's Iran that started this. It's Iran that's dragged Strait of Hormuz into this war and also taking hostage not only energy and oil supplies, but also global supplies, from fertilizers that will affect food prices through to humanitarian aid that goes into Africa. So really, this is a global problem now waiting for a solution.
Mina, it's difficult to even know who is making the decisions and who's in charge of the negotiations or what comes next in Iran. But what is the thought in Abu Dhabi about who could influence Iran at a time like this?
China, of course, plays a hugely important role, as does Russia. Communications here from Abu Dhabi to both the Chinese and the Russians are ongoing. We have the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi today in China. This was a pre-scheduled trip, and there's lots of investment and business deals between China and the UAE, but I expect that this will be on the agenda. And as I said, Russia plays a role, but also looking to those countries that can have an influence from Europe, from other parts of Asia that are affected by this also.
Mina, great to get your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll continue to bring you reaction from around the region, and just confirming that breaking news that we've been hearing from the UK's Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, saying that he has been working with President Macron. So the UK and France will be co-hosting a summit to advance work on a plan to safeguard shipping through the Strait of Hormuz.